Welcome, everyone, to the Sirius Portal Series, our last teaching class on the Astrology of Humanity, as I'm kind of calling it, the Transpersonal Grand Sextile, also called the Minor Grand Trine. We have a very deep class presented or ready to present to you, and I have my co-host, my star brother, Randy Keller, is going to join us. And so uh, we will dive in. So, for anybody that's viewing this after the fact, this is the one class from the Sirius Portal series I'm actually going to put up on my YouTube channel because it is such pivotal astrology for humanity, as you'll find out. If you're just seeing this on YouTube, this is a whole series of classes I taught, 7 days of like 60 to 90 minutes teachings plus Q&A about the major events of 2026. And if you're seeing this on YouTube, there's a link below. The series is now available on demand. You can check it out there. So, welcome. We will start with an invocation to the transpersonal planets, and then I'll hand the baton over to Randy, and he's going to give his presentation, a brilliant clang. And then it'll come back to me, and we'll talk about Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, the higher octaves of the personal planets. We'll look at the meanings of these planets individually, the signs they're transiting, the tarot indicators. There'll be precise dates given as usual. We'll talk about historical alignments. Shouldn't be a question mark there. Don't know why. And then we will end with a Q&A. And there's just a lot that's going to be shared in this class, so get ready. So here's our invocation. Hail Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, higher mind, higher heart, and higher power. Help us to look beyond the veil that obscures truth and reality. Help us to come back to beginner's mind, be the love we wish to see in the world, and do our part to contribute to the transformation of humanity. Help us to see ourselves and each other and the world around us with new eyes, and may the vision we see be the heaven on earth we are seeking. Blessed be. So we enter into the portal, and I will let Randy share his PowerPoint and take it away.
So as long as people are able to see that, let me just start by greeting you all. Happy Friday to everyone. Today I have a presentation that I hope is meaningful to you. I'm going to be addressing this big astrology of July, which actually started the formation of this particular configuration started in 2022, and it's been moving in and out of orb, but it gets really, really close this July. Now you may notice, I'm going to see if I can get rid of this. There we go. I hate seeing myself to the right there. So I've named this presentation A Brilliant Clang at 444, and you'll understand a little bit more about that in a moment. But essentially, I think it's important to start today by talking a little bit about some basics, and the basics being in astrology, the way that things are looked at is in terms of their location relative to the sun. And this is how things get divided out in the astrological world. And basically, the effects from that are felt on a personal level, a social level, and what we call a transpersonal level. And the personal level are the planets that consist of Mercury, Venus, Mars, the moon, and those are considered uh, influences that affect our personality, our instincts, our day-to-day behavior. And then from there, we move out and we have the social planets, which are represented by Jupiter and Saturn. Those tend to be a little bit more about the societal structure itself. Saturn being, connected to institutions, the government, rules, structures, and Jupiter is more about beliefs, belief systems like religion, philosophy, higher education. And then as you move further out, we have what are known as the transpersonal planets, and that's what we're going to be addressing today. Those primarily deal with more generational type of things, and as Harmony alluded to, they're considered to be higher octaves of the personal planets. So, for instance, Uranus being the higher mind, Neptune being the higher love, and Pluto being connected to the to Mars, or a higher representation of power. And so today, one of the things that we're going to be talking about in depth is this event in July this year, and I call it a mini Grand Trine. I think you'll hear it referred to in many different ways. It's a minor Grand Trine, but essentially it's made up of all of those outer planets. And in this illustration on your screen, I've shown it as a triangle, and this is the origin of the title of my presentation today, because as I looked at this and pondered it and meditated upon this particular configuration late last year, the concept of the triangle came to mind for me. And I don't know if any of you have ever been involved, for instance, in an orchestra or a band, but the triangle is a very interesting instrument in that, like these planets, which are in this triangle, it's almost transcendent in its nature. And I found the following definition or description of a triangle just actually prior to this meeting. And what it said is that the triangle produces a bright, shimmering tone, rich in high frequency harmonics when struck, and unlike the fundamental pitches of strings, brass, and woodwinds. And those overtones occupy a spectral range where most orchestral instruments have less energy, ensuring that that sonic highlight pierces the dense textures without high volume. And as I thought about that, that's where I started comparing what's occurring in July to a triangle, and literally a triangle being struck, and this higher tone coming forth that transcends and rises above the other sounds that we're so used to. And so, just a few facts about the what I call the mini Grand Trine is there is in this formation a trine, and that is in this particular instance going to exist between Pluto and Uranus. And then there are two sextiles at the same time that are taking place, and those are from Pluto to Neptune and from Uranus to Neptune. And so, as I mentioned earlier, this started in 2022. It started forming, and then it kind of slipped in and out as there were some retrogrades and movement of these planets over time. It started forming more exactly in 23 and 24, and now it's fully strengthening in 2025, as we'll see in just a moment. And so in July, the fastest moving planet of that trio, which would be Uranus, will make an aspect on the 15th of a sextile to Neptune. And then on July 18th, a couple days later, it will make a sextile to Pluto. That should say a sextile. It says a trine.
No,
And so,
it's a trine. It's Uranus
oh yeah, trine.
and
I'm
I.
sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
In my note below, I apologize. So
Yeah,
then
no
on
worries.
July 15th, Uranus will be at 4 degrees and 23 minutes of Gemini. And Neptune, which will be retrograde at that time, will be at 4 degrees and 23 minutes of Aries. And so that's on the 15th. And then 3 days later, Uranus will be at 4 degrees and 29 minutes of Gemini. And Pluto will be also retrograde at 4 degrees and 29 minutes of Aquarius. And so there's where the two sextiles take place. And just to give you a picture of this, I've produced a chart for the moment in which Uranus, and I'll point that out, enters the fourth degree of its sign, which puts it at the same degree as these other two planets. And so that's on July 6th at 8:12 a.m. And I set this chart for Washington, D.C., being the capital of the country we live in, although there may be some foreign participants today. So I just want to clarify that. But when it enters at the fourth degree, it will put all three outer planets at 4 degrees. And so that's where I came up with this title of A Brilliant Clang at 444. And this relationship of being in the fourth degree is going to persist most of July. It'll actually all of July from that point forward until the 31st when Uranus will move out to the fifth degree of Gemini. And so what about 444? I know that there's a discipline out there known as numerology that many of you may be familiar with. And in that particular system, 444 signifies something about divine support and protection, as well as building a solid foundation. And there's kind of an offshoot to numerology where we look at angel numbers for those that may be familiar with that. And this also indicates something about protection and guidance. And it also calls on us to trust our intuition. And it's usually when there's a lot of change or uncertainty taking place. So I found that particular aspect of this formation to be quite revealing as we start to talk about a few other things here today. So I was curious, and Harmony and I actually went back and forth a little bit on searching for this, but I wondered how often this particular configuration has taken place. And interestingly, what I did is I went to the software that I use in my astrology practice, which is SolarFire, and I did a search, and I started at 5000 BC, and I came forward to the end of this year, and I basically said, when has Neptune been in Aries and also in a sextile to Pluto and a sextile to Uranus? Well, as you can see, the dates that came up on my screen were all this year. In other words, at least according to this search, we haven't seen this before. This is very unique in nature, and particularly being that Neptune is in Aries at that apex point. So I think that's the distinction of this triangle. And I thought that was noteworthy that we're seeing, and there's a lot of astrology in 2026 that's like the first of its kind. So it just kind of adds fuel to this year being very, very unique in nature. Okay, so what might this mean? First of all, these planets are in air and fire signs. We've got Pluto in air, we've got Uranus in air, and then we have Neptune in fire. And typically, that deals with an innovative period, a period of spiritual awakenings. And when we break it down individually, this is a harmonious formation. You know, trines and sextiles, for those who may be familiar, tend to be indicative of periods where we're looking at opportunities, we're looking at things being favorable in nature, harmonious. And so when we look at that, we're looking at the planet Uranus, which deals with change and innovation and sudden insights. We're dealing with Neptune, which is all about things of a higher nature, the mystical side of life, the spiritual connection. And then finally, Pluto, where we're dealing with things that are being transformed and changed and reborn again. And so really, this really does point to some kind of a paradigm shift where we're entering a period maybe of intellectual liberation, something new taking place, something new coming forth, new initiation. And we all, for those that have been following it, Pluto in Aquarius does represent collective evolution. And then Uranus in Gemini often deals with, radical new ideas, communications, um, particularly in Gemini, we're dealing also with things that are of a technological nature. And then with Neptune and Aries, the highest vibration of that, there's some lower vibrations of Neptune and Aries that I haven't been present for other classes if Harmony talked about those at all. But the higher one would be is that this is really an initiation of a more idyllic, more visionary, um, higher minded period of time. And so I want to make this a little interesting today, and I'm going to put a different twist on things. And we're going to look a little bit at asteroids. This is an area that I really like. Um, I have started a book that I'll talk a little bit about at the end about asteroids. But asteroids are a very unique branch of astrology in that um, they're they're new. They're the new kids in the block. Uh, they are smaller objects. They are um, smaller in nature, and also they are broader in terms of how they can be used in astrology. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. If you're unfamiliar, um, there's a lot of nuance to asteroids. And one of the things I wanted to point out is in what I've written on the screen is they can reveal things that might otherwise be hidden. And for instance, I have shown in a series of blogs I've posted over the last 6 months that they can reveal the role of key people in your life. They can show influences on our psyche that maybe otherwise we haven't been able to explain. And they can even point to significant places where maybe we've lived or visited that have impacted our life. So they're really interesting in nature when they're included in a chart, and they're very nuanced. Um, just to talk a little bit about how big of a universe we're looking at, there are about 1.2 million. I've seen some estimates up to 1.9 million asteroids in the asteroid belt. And for those that may be unfamiliar, the asteroid belt sits out there between Mars and Jupiter. And in that circulating body are, again, about 1.2 million asteroids, and there are about 60,000 of those named and identified and tracked by different institutes and groups. And if you look at most astrology software that tracks asteroids, and I just verified this number before coming on. For instance, if you went to astrobank.com, there are 25,641 asteroids used currently in astrology that can be put into a chart. So what I did is I started pondering this mini triangle in July. And I want to point out, first of all, that asteroids are very much in the experimental and exploratory stage at this point. Uh, Unlike traditional planets, you can interchange them, the meaning. In other words, if something isn't an exact match to a name, if it's close, what I've found is it often is very revealing and spot on when you put it in someone's chart. Or if it sounds similar in nature as well. And that's very different than traditional astrology where Mercury is never Mars and Mars is never Venus. They're very distinct and different, but I've seen asteroids that could represent a name of someone as well as an island. And that's what's interesting about this particular part of astrology. And then lastly, I'd say that this area of astrology does involve, I think, a more of the use of intuition and discernment to really unveil the different layers that are available. So what I'm about to present to you, and I wanted to throw this out before I get into the material, is this is very exploratory in nature. What I'm doing is I'm responding to some intuitive insights that I received when I was analyzing this mini Grand Trine. And one of the things in introduction I'd like to say is that anyone who's really been watching the news over the last probably 5 to 10 years has heard the extensive discussions about our unknown history. And those can include things like Göbekli Tepe, which I've mentioned on this slide. Recently, all these significant structures that have been found beneath the Egyptian pyramids that are yet to be explored. And for anybody who may be familiar with the researcher Graham Hancock, he has characterized our past as us being a species with amnesia. And I've always resonated with that. It's felt like, there's just a whole lot missing from what we know. Some of us have trouble remembering what we did last week, let alone what may have occurred thousands and thousands of years ago. So it's very, very possible that there's lots of our history missing. But I feel like we're in an era where a lot is going to be revealed, and perhaps this year. And so, with that backdrop, I started to muse a bit about what this upcoming configuration between Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto may mean. And I went to my database, if you will, of available asteroids, and I decided intuitively to look at these three asteroids initially. And those were the asteroid Angel, Messenger, and one called Patria. And so the chart I had shown you earlier when the ingress of these planets took place on the 6th, I went forward to the 12th and cast this chart for Washington, D.C., and I'll tell you why in just a moment. But when I did, I found that the Angel asteroid was here in the second house in Scorpio, square to the asteroid Messenger in the 11th house, and that was further square to Patria in the 8th house. And I found that very interesting because it was, again, occurring during this time when these outer planets were lining up in this very auspicious mini triangle. And so just briefly, without getting into great detail, Messenger is just exactly how it sounds. It deals with communication, sending and receiving, and that's the signification of this particular asteroid. And you can see it sits at the top of a T-square at this moment at 12:13 on July 12th. And so here's Angel in the intense, deep, investigative sign of Scorpio sitting in the second house. And it deals with divine messages, guardian, and a protector. And then Patria deals with the fatherland, our origin, and also heaven. And here it is in the 8th house in the earth sign Taurus at 23 degrees and 5 minutes. And so what I immediately thought about here is you've got a divine messenger sitting opposite our origins, our fatherland, our hidden past over here in the 8th house. And it's all channeling out here to the collective in the 11th house in this very demonstrative and dramatic sign of Leo. And so what I started to wonder is, I wonder if there's something that might come forth in this time frame that is being divinely inspired, that's coming out of the hidden side of life, but it's also in this place where the angel is literally sitting where people find their security, where they find their worth and an understanding of themselves, not only materially, but what their own worth is. And perhaps some of that will be aided by understanding a bit more about who we truly are and where we came from. And then that all funnels out here to the collective in the form of a message. So stay with me here. That expanded my thinking into, well, when we start thinking about the collective psyche, And the fact that this particular formation, again, I believe is all about expanding our understanding and taking us to some new level of looking at ourselves and being able to communicate about that. One of the most persistent stories of ancient civilizations has been Atlantis. And the story Atlantis, for those of you who may not know, originates exclusively from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. And adding to that, later came Edgar Cayce, who's known as the Sleeping Prophet. Here, he was born in the United States, I believe, in Virginia. And he also added to the Atlantis story. He believed it to be a real advanced civilization, and he has quite a bit to say about it. And I'm not saying that Plato didn't believe it to be a real existing civilization that he was sharing with us. A lot of people say, oh, it was just a metaphor or a story that he made up, but we just don't know. We don't know clearly. Casey claimed that it was a real advanced civilization, and in his writings, he called them the children of the law of one. And he claimed they used massive crystals. They knew how to work with energy, healing, flight, communication, and he had quite a bit to say. He also warned us that as a modern society, we could be vulnerable to repeat some of the Atlantean mistakes, where he felt that greed and over reliance on technology or using technology without ethics was what ultimately led to their downfall. And so this led me to further think about the fact that there might be an asteroid named Atlantis. And indeed, there was when I did a search. And I happen to also be familiar with an asteroid called DNA, which I've included in this list today. We've already talked a little bit about Messenger and Patria. And then I know that dolphins have been often associated with Atlantis. So I thought to myself, I wonder if there's an asteroid dolphin. And indeed, there was. Its spelling, as you can see, is a little different. But there is an asteroid dolphin. And so let's just look at this. Atlantis, I feel like it could literally be interpreted as the Atlantis, or it could be symbolic in the chart of any number of lost civilizations or past life memories that we may have that are tied to myths of spiritual healing, or even the hubris that led to a downfall. And so just again, let's hold that thought a moment. And then the asteroid DNA literally corresponds to our physical and spiritual genetics, our ancestry, our roots. And then finally, dolphin is symbolic of divine protection. It's often considered to be kind of the bridge between two worlds. It's the higher Christ consciousness. And it's also about freedom and joy and intelligence. So when I placed these asteroids in the chart, here's what I saw. And so this was, again, I want you to understand how I came up with the chart that you're seeing on the screen. And what I did is what I wanted to see was when Atlantis came into the orb of Mars. And the reason I did that is because Mars is also in the sign of Gemini at this in this time frame. And with Mars and Gemini, in a traditional sense, Mars and Gemini is all about actively and very assertively bringing forth some kind of communication or idea into the world. And it's in the ninth house, which is all about bringing forth truth and understanding. And so when Atlantis entered the ninth degree, I cast this particular chart. And when I did, here's what I saw, and you can see it on the screen, is that here's Atlantis working with Mars at a moment when we've got Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto still in the fourth degree. But we also have in that same ninth house DNA, which is all about, again, from the previous slide, and I can go back one moment. DNA deals with our physical and spiritual genetics, our ancestry, and our roots. And so, interestingly, there was DNA right alongside Atlantis in this ninth house, and not that far from Uranus, which brings sudden insights, and it's also in the sign of Gemini at this point. So it's all again about ideas and a communication. And the interesting thing that I found is when I cast the chart with Dolphin also in the chart, here's Dolphin in a trine to Uranus, an opposition to Neptune, and a trine to Pluto. And so everybody can probably see that formation in blue. Hopefully that looks like a kite to you because that's what that's considered in astrology is a kite formation. And it's really interesting that at the tail of that kite sits Dolphin. So what might this all mean? Well, as I mentioned, Atlantis is in this sign of Gemini, which it's closely aligned with Mars, and I did that by design. And so, being that they both reside in that ninth house at that moment, it feels like things distant and far away, which in mundane astrology, that's what really sits in the ninth house. And in modern astrology, we know that this is the place where we seek truth and we cast a wide net in pursuit of the meaning of things. And so here's Atlantis sitting there with Mars. Additionally, we have DNA, 1 degree and 28 minutes away from Atlantis. And so it seems to complement this theme of information about a lost past or a lost civilization or an understanding of our genetics and roots. And so at the same moment, you've got Messenger in the sign of Leo, where I think one could reasonably conclude that those messages are likely to be bold and dramatic if they did indeed come out. And that's in the 11th house. And the Messenger resides in the place of group consciousness. And in mundane astrology, interestingly, that's the house of representatives. So I would just, maybe postulate maybe this is a government announcement of some type that maybe we'd see. And then Patria was sitting in the eighth house in the sign of Taurus, an earth sign. And interestingly, Taurus, for those of you that may not be, familiar with some of the more nuanced meanings of Taurus, Taurus is directly connected to the Atlantic Ocean basin. It's connected to cultural centers and culture. It's connected to emeralds, excavation, geology, the Greek archipelago, it's jewels and stones. It's interestingly about round things. And every time I've ever seen Atlantis described, it's a round structure, the concentric circles of Atlantis. And then the eighth house, of course, is where we find hidden matters, things about our legacies and death. And so, having Patria sit there seems very auspicious to me too. And then finally, Dolphin. Dolphin is connected symbolically with Atlantis. And then that's mostly coming from New Age sources. Plato did not connect the two to dolphins, but dolphins are considered to represent like the Atlantean healers who, and perhaps Harmony knows more about this. She's more of an expert on Sirius than I am, but they were considered the Atlantean healers from Sirius. And telepathically, they would share crystal wisdom. They had a higher vibrational knowledge. They swam in the Atlantean pools. And so it's very interesting to me that here's Dolphin sitting opposite the Aries Neptune apex point of the mini Grand Trine. And so when it's part of a larger pattern like this, basically what we're looking at is the channeling of harmonious energy through that focal point, which is Neptune in Aries. And so Neptune in Aries is a lot of things, but one of the things it really is about is this initiation of higher knowledge and spiritual understanding and a more idyllic look at things. And so I just want to toggle back briefly to this chart again because I was only there for a minute. But I also want to point out that I found that there's an asteroid Plato. also. And at the moment that all these other things are happening, here's Plato in the 10th house. And if you can see, he's almost dead on at the same degree as Sirius. And if I'm not mistaken, and Harmony can comment on this in a moment, um, Sirius is a planet that is connected with, something becoming renowned or becoming known or recognized. And here's Plato in this 10th house, which is the place of the most prominent place of the chart of public image. And I'm just musing again. I mentioned that this is very exploratory in nature, but I'll be interested maybe to come back a year from now and revisit what really comes out in this time frame. But wouldn't it be, very satisfying to Plato, wherever he may be, to find out that in this moment, the story that he told and that was left to humanity came out and was clarified in some way. And literally, that would be a high point for Plato right here at the top of the chart. So uh, for me, this became a very uh, interesting configuration. And it kind of shows how you can add additional asteroids to the chart and ferret out additional knowledge. And I've seen it over and over again. Let me just move forward here a little bit. Um, there is a book that I am currently working on. It's called Down the Rabbit Hole, a nuanced look at asteroids in astrology. I hope to have it out in the next few months. And it's a look at 25 prominent people's lives. But I'm looking at it through not the traditional astrology, although I do address some of that, but I add unique asteroids to their charts that are directly connected to their lives. And it's pretty remarkable how highly correlative those are. And so I just wanted to give myself a shameless plug there that will be coming out. But I wanted to thank you for an opportunity to present this particular perspective. Um, I can be reached if anybody has any personal questions or further questions about this at the email on the screen. And I think Harmony may put some additional information on at the end. This is my website. And one of my favorite musical artists was Dan Fogelberg, and he's actually in this book that I'm writing. And in one of his songs, he said, "May the trail rise up to meet you, and may your heart rejoice in song. May the skies be fair above you as you journey ever on." And I would wish the same for everyone in attendance here today. It's going to be a year to remember, I believe, a year of reset, a year of change. And I think it's going to be very important for us as a collective to rise above the, the chaotic feelings that may be elicited by some of the events that occur this year, and to keep ourselves grounded and remember that, uh, in the words of another astrologer who I know quite well, we don't know enough to worry. And we just need to lean into this and realize that society is about to go through a major, major change. And with that, let me just stop my share
Thank you.
and come back to the screen.
Now we're side by side. Thank you, Randy. That I really enjoyed that. And the he and I we have a lot of text exchanges chatting about astrology, but he's been telling me about his work on his book, and um I'm excited for when that comes out. And so um yeah, yeah, I think this year is just going to be phenomenal. And the one thing I wanted to say about Dolphin or Sirius, because you mentioned maybe Harmony has something to say, is just that Sirius is connected to world teachers and higher teachings and the Syrian High Council, which, is conceived of as this council of beings from other places that have high levels of consciousness that are, connecting with humanity to help us evolve. That's like, and many ancient cultures have things to say about Sirius. In Hawaiian, actually, The ancient Hawaiians say that the first beings that came to this planet were when it was a water world, and they were the dolphins and the whales, and they came from Sirius. And then the Pleiades is also part of their myth. So the dolphin Sirian connection is part of the ancient Hawaiian mysticism. And then I think actually there might be a connection with that in Egypt too. They have dolphins in Egypt over in the Red Sea. You can go swim with them. Anyhow, so thank you. And I'm going to pull
Yeah.
up I'm going to, what am I going to do? I'm going to remove your pin and then share ooh, what's happening here? Nope. Hold on. I have to find my, there we go. That's why my, here we go. There we go. Tuck this away. So I'm just tucking the chat away, but I'll pop it back up when I need to. So we're going to talk about the higher octaves when the personal becomes transpersonal. And this image was made for me by a student, Susie Farmer. So the transpersonal planets, and Randy did speak to some of this, they lie beyond the visible. So Sun through Saturn are the visible planets. Saturn's often called the dweller at the threshold or the gatekeeper, and he's the gatekeeper to what lies beyond. And Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury, the mind. Neptune is the higher octave of Venus, the heart. And Pluto is the higher octave of Mars, the will and drive. So essentially, the lower egoic planets are taken to a higher plane by these transpersonal planets. If the ego can surrender, it can be liberating and awakening. If the ego fights it, it can be chaotic and destabilizing. And the ego, from a depth psychological perspective, really likes to be in control. And with the transpersonal planets, you actually have to surrender control. You truly do, because there's something higher than you can even conceive that wants to come in. And if you stay in control, you're going to limit what's possible for yourself, for your contribution to humanity. And so this is really important. You can see it in the tarot cards too. So these are the tarot cards for Uranus and Mercury, Uranus on the left, Mercury on the right. And so thinking is taken to a higher level when the higher octave, Uranus, moves beyond Mercury. Uranus is the Fool card, the 0 point. The card is literally zero. And we talked about this in the Uranus class, so I'm not going to say a ton, but I just wanted to put these side to side or side by side. He's, walking off a cliff. He's not looking down, but up. He's just, trusting. On the right-hand side, the magician has all the tools at his disposal. His mind can create anything. But in order to raise our minds, we have to let go. We have to surrender and trust. And that's what this imagery on the left-hand side really evokes. Um, these are the two cards for Neptune and Venus. Neptune's on the left-hand side, Venus is on the right. So feeling taken to a higher level is Neptune, the higher octave of Venus. And Neptune's the hanged man on the left. It's the card number 12, and 1 plus 2 equals 3, and the one on the right is the third card. So there's a connection there numerologically. The hanged man is a card of surrender. His head is below with his feet above. He's turned upside down. So Aries, the head, is not leading anymore. The feet are leading. They're at the top, right? And the feet are Pisces, Neptune ruled sign. This is the Neptune card. And, higher love sometimes actually means to let go and to surrender. To not hold on. That personal heart has attachment. These are my people. This is my love, my, desires, my whatever. But Neptune is about something that's coming in and through it's not just about ourselves. It's beyond that. Empress on the right is the Venus card, and she is nature itself, fecund, fertile, love embodied. Um, And then we've got the Pluto and Mars card. So Pluto on the left, Mars on the right, and this is the higher will and power, the ego will taken to a higher level is the Pluto energy. So Pluto on the left is judgment. It's the 20th card, 20. Can also see it as two X's, two tens, which evokes the Wheel of Fortune, which is the card for the year we're in. And we talked about this card in the Pluto class, but it's the resurrection, clearly they're coming out of coffins. And the one on the right is the Mars card, and it's the Tower, and it's number 16. If you add it up, it goes to seven, which evokes the Chariot, which is fascinating because Chariot's the weirdest card because they say it's the Cancer card, but it's a dude fully armored in a chariot. The bottom of his body is like merging with like the square that he's stuck in, like it looks like he's stuck in cement. Not the card I would choose for Cancer, the sign of the Divine Mother, but it does evoke the shadow of Cancer, which is when we have so much emotional energy that we have to like armor ourselves and we get rigid, and our will and ego is maybe, overdoing. So the tower obviously evokes tower moments where things are falling apart. And so, one of the things to be really tuning into this year, will we consciously choose eternal tower moments as a humanity, constant crises and things falling apart, resistance to change, and then explosions that happen as a result? Or are we going to raise our collective ego to something higher? Are we going to awaken? So, Uranus and Gemini, shocks to the mind, to perception, to intellect. Literally, Gemini is about coming back to beginner's mind. And so that place of beginner's mind is where we are open-minded. We don't have judgments, beliefs that make it so that we can only see what we believe in. We come into this place of like a child. Children naturally have this openness, and they're just like, wow, look at that. Look at that. I remember years ago, there was a guy that I was dating, and after multiple times of us going outside at night and seeing the stars, and every time I'd go, "Oh my God, look at the stars." He commented and he's like, "Boy, when you see the stars every night, you act as though it's the first time you've ever seen them." And I was like, "I do." And he's like, "Yeah, you always go, 'Oh my God, look at the stars.'" And I was like, "But they're amazing." And he's like, "Yeah, but it's just like, it comes across as though it's the first time you've ever seen them." And that's that beginner's mind perspective. It's just like being in awe of things, even if you've seen it 10,000 times, like coming back to that pure, um, connection and expression is important. And Uranus and Gemini is going to ask us to do that. I mean, it is on offer, let's say. This can be a transit that wakes up humanity. There can be an awakening to the need for inner hieros, which is the inner marriage of the masculine and the feminine. The Gemini twins today are seen as two boys, they're brothers, but anciently it was a man and a woman. And it was also a mortal and an immortal. So it was a mortal man and it was an immortal woman. So it has to do with our human self and our divine self as well. And this waking up to the fact that we're more than just one of these things, and then the union that needs to happen. Eventually, in the 7 year transit of Uranus, he'll get to the anti-galactic center, which is the silver gateway. The golden gateway is the galactic center. It's the center of our Milky Way galaxy. And everything's going around it. But when you get to the anti-galactic center, the silver gate, it's on the edge. It's the galactic edge. And that's the place where we see beyond our own galaxy. It's where we see what lies beyond. That will be fascinating, but that doesn't happen for a bit. New technologies, lots of people talking about this, also Pluto and Aquarius. What I don't think we need is chips in the brain, and that is on the table. But we could even see new forms of, what is it called? Sorry, new forms of transportation. I mentioned this in the Uranus and Gemini class, like, who knows, flying cars. And so changes in boundaries and borders of countries. I actually texted Randy today because I also have this too, but it's in storage, this book where you can look up the associations of like the planets, the signs, the houses, and see like some key words to look up stuff anyhow. And I just kept hearing boundaries and borders, boundaries and borders. And I was thinking it was Gemini because Gemini can represent like neighborhoods and where you come from, and as opposed to the opposite sign of Sagittarius, which is foreign travel, other countries, kind of a thing. But he looked it up and he was like, boundaries and borders was actually Uranus. I knew it was one of them. It kept coming in. But Gemini rules change and mutability. So the changing of boundaries and borders can be part of the Uranus and Gemini transit. So obviously we did really deep teachings for Uranus and Gemini in our fourth class. Um, he began ingressing into Gemini in 2025. He goes in there for good this year, April 25th. And here's the Uranus card, here's the Gemini card. So again, that fool, right? The 0 point, walking off a cliff, looking up, not down. Lovers, although people tend to think it's a card about relationship, which can be a piece of it, it's really about decisions and choices we make. And so, what decision will we make as a humanity? Will we rise in consciousness and ascend? Will we descend and devolve into chaos? I've heard some people say that the world is splitting and that some of us are going to ascend and some of us are going to stay stuck or whatever. But that's actually not the metaphor or the symbolism that shows wholeness. That just shows more duality. It really does. Some of us are going to ascend and some of us are going to stay stuck. No. And I will tell you, one of the things that will probably be required is, especially those of us that are ready to ascend, we're willing to see where these other people, maybe who are less conscious, maybe, where they're coming from, and not dehumanize them, and not polarize from them, and not split and want war and battle. Like that, this is actually part of the Gemini medicine. So, the thing here is the choice needs to be that the feminine needs to lead. If you notice, the angel is looking down, she's looking to the angel, he's looking at her. She's connected to this higher energy that's coming in and through, and he is looking at her for her leadership. And the feminine really needs to lead. The feminine is the heart in all of us. The heart needs to lead. The ego can't lead. The ego needs to follow, protect, make sure we're safe, or whatever, be in the world, but the heart needs to lead. Um, and there's just actually so much more symbolism in these cards that we could get into, but we'd be here for 3 hours. Neptune and Aries. So the metaphor that came to me when I was I think I was on Martha Hines. I think it was during her something that I did with her where we were all like feeling into, or maybe it was Astrology Hub. I can't remember, but Neptune and Aries, we were supposed to all think of what comes to mind. And I thought of love and action because Neptune is love and Aries is action, initiation, and that is like one of the highest energies. But there's also dissolution of the yang masculine ego-based principle, Aries, deception and illusion when it comes to war. That can be one of the things that we might be dealing with. It's like, don't look here, look over here. It looks like something's happening, but who's pulling strings behind, the veil of illusion? Recall the Sabian symbol when Neptune crosses into the first degree of Aries that we talked about in the first Aries class. And it literally talks about a woman rising out of the sea. And it's funny because when you look at the Sabian symbols, the first degree of Aries is a woman coming out of the sea, and then a seal embraces her. The last degree, 30 Pisces, is a boy who's looking at these men that have been etched into a mountain, and then he's growing and becoming that which he has idealized his whole life. So the first degree of Aries is feminine. It's a woman who's fully formed, rising out of the sea. And the last degree is a boy who's becoming a man, who's looking at these men and, these ideals and becoming it. And so it's this inversion of the poles. We have the solar feminine, zero Aries, and the lunar masculine, 30 Pisces. And so I feel like this need for the inversion of poles that have been stuck, and maybe, actual pole reversal can be part of our, I mean, that's other people have been talking about that. So dissolution of the Aries point being fixed and of the solar hero ego myths dominating, which is what I teach in Stargate Mystery School. We fix the Aries point at the end of the age of Aries. And all of the ages would take turns being the first sign, being the one that rises, that leads. But at the end of the age of Aries, we fixed the whole tropical zodiac starting at Aries, zero Aries being the spring equinox point. What has that done to human consciousness? So Neptune dipped into Aries last year, 2025. First ingress was March 30th. And then we'll be into Aries for good January 26th, 2026, coming this month. And here is Neptune card, Aries card. And I mean, that one's just can't move away from the symbolism of this. The hanged man, we need to surrender. And who needs to surrender? This, emperor, this masculine archetype of leadership. So recall that Emperor connects to all the Aries planets, and there's so much Aries this year, right? It's a fire horse year, and we've got Saturn in Aries, Neptune in Aries. Both will be conjunct. Chiron and Eris are in Aries. They will be conjunct for the third and final time. It's just like a lot of Aries. And Aries Emperor, the Emperor is the Aries card. By himself, he's clearly about control, rulership, dominance, leadership. He's very yang, right? Yang as opposed to yin. Neptune is like a tsunami wave coming in to dissolve things. And the emperor needs to surrender. And he needs to stop leading from the head, the will, the ego. He needs to turn upside down. So the head is down at the bottom. In doing so, he can become enlightened. That's what that gold sun around his head is. And he needs to lead from the heart. It's interesting because this emperor, he has the crown on his head, but his hair isn't golden. It's like this is a position of authority, but it's not like the awakening has reached all the way to the top of his head, which you can see in the tarot when their hair is golden or when they have like a golden orb around their head. Also, the emperor, like his feet are covered in metal armor. He's cut off from the source. On the left-hand side, it's the feet that are first. The feet are at the top, but his feet are like all covered with metal. He can't even touch the earth because he's, got metallic armor on his feet. So this is evoking Neptune and Aries transit. And then Pluto in Aquarius. So this speaks to the transformation of humanity. And I believe we need to reclaim the female water bearer. The Aquarius water bearer used to be a she before it was a he. And one of the ways you can this is kind of common sense, grails, chalices, cups, urns, they're all held by women. They're symbols for the womb. So the grail bearer and the chalice, bearer and the urn bearer, which is the water bearer, it's a symbol of the womb. That's what these are. And so it used to be a woman, used to be feminine. And then I think we need to reclaim the original teachings of the celestial sea area of the sky, which is Aquarius, also Capricornus, because that sea goat, he's a sea goat. So he's a tail that's going in the water. And then we've got Aquarius, the water bearer, and then the southern fish below. And then we've got the two Pisces fish. And then even below that, we've got Cetus, the whale, and Eridanus, the river. This is the whole celestial sea area of the sky that's very important mystically. And I talk about that in Stargate, and we talked about it actually, I think in the Pluto class in this series. So, will humanity become cyborgs or robots? Gosh, I hope not. Or will humanity learn to be in right relationship to technology so that we don't repeat Atlantis, as Randy brought forward that profound myth and story? I don't think it's just a myth, meaning um, fiction. I think it's a myth, meaning it happened, and it's mythic, it's archetypal. Also, recall Pluto is heading into the out of bounds south position from 2025 to 2035. Revolution by the people. Last one for thousands of years. Talked about it in the Pluto class. So Pluto actually entered into Aquarius or dipped in 2023. He's there for good now. And we have all these three positioning themselves to get into alignment. Judgment card, Pluto card, star card, Aquarius. So again, resurrection. And look, she's got the golden hair. She's naked with golden hair. She looks just like this woman over here, just whiter. They're all white. They've all had their color taken away. Oh, actually, that's a whole other, wow. That's interesting. I hadn't even thought of it that way, but they've had their color taken away, not meaning like we shouldn't see color in a bad way, but more like we're all human. Black, white, yellow, brown, in this position, the white people are never that white unless you're like albino, and even then it's more like a pinkish color. So they've had any of their color removed, maybe almost to evoke that like we are human. We are all human. Yes, we have our different cultures and our beautiful backgrounds, and we all share this planet together. And we're all going to destroy it if we don't wake up. We're all on this ship together, or this train, however you want to conceive of it. Star card is a card of hope and healing. And this is Sirius, this big yellow star. These seven white stars are the Pleiades. And so we've got, the potential for humanity during this 20-year transit of Pluto and Aquarius to resurrect hope and peace and calm after storms, but also resurrect our awareness of our connection to the stars and the star beings who are our ancestors, our star ancestors. Which again, Randy brought up in his share at the beginning as well. So July 2026, as Randy mentioned, and this is like you have all the dates here, so you guys will get the PDF of the slides. But the 15th is the Uranus Neptune sextile, the 17th to the 18th, depending on if you're in Pacific time or Eastern time, and then if you're somewhere else in the world, you'll have to, check your exact time, but it's one of those 2 days. Uranus trines Pluto. This one's the first. We actually had two Uranus Neptune sextiles last year. But the first Uranus Pluto trine is this year, and the first Neptune Pluto sextile is this year. And that's all from, July 24th, 25th, again, because of the, Pacific Coast, East Coast. We've got the first one from the 20th through the 21st. Jupiter in Leo triggers the whole thing very tightly. Jupiter is trine Neptune, opposite Pluto, and sextiles Uranus as these three form their alignment together. And Jupiter acts as a trigger. We talked about that in the Jupiter class. Also in this portal, July 22nd is Mary Magdalene feast day with Eris stationing retrograde. And we talked about Mary Magdalene's connection to Eris and why that Eris archetype of revealing the shadow, revealing what's hidden, disrupting old orders is very connected to her archetypally. And it happens to her station, happens to fall on the Mary Magdalene feast day now. And then we have the Mayan Day Out of Time, which is like an important date in the Mayan yearly calendar. And that all happens in a 10-day window, you know? And We even have some Mars triggers occurring at the beginning of July as well. Interestingly, in the United States solar return chart, from July 2nd through the 5th, Mars will co-join Uranus, sextile Neptune, trine Pluto, and then also square the nodes. And so it's just July is going to be pretty epic. So as Randy called his PowerPoint presentation, and I pointed out the 444 of the degrees. I put in 444 and 555 because they are all at the fourth degree, but then with Sabian symbols, you round up to the nearest whole degree. So it's also 555. And these are the exact degrees, 4 degrees, 23 minutes for Uranus, Neptune. And recall, we had two of those last year. So the Uranus Pluto trine is 429, first of several, and the Neptune Pluto is 420, first of several. So it's a tight little window here, and they all round up to 5 in the Sabian symbols, which I'm going to show you now. So Uranus at 5 Gemini is a revolutionary magazine asking for action. The explosive tendency of repressed feelings and root emotions. Every movement overstressing one direction calls forth in time an equally extreme movement in the opposite direction. How Gemini twins. This is particularly true at the level of the dualistic mind symbolized in the zodiac by Gemini. What is rigidly bound in form and convention tends to explode into formlessness. It may do so violently if socially oppressed through revolution or at the psychological level in psychosis. Or it may withdraw inwardly into the mystical state in which one identifies with an unformulatable reality. And so he talks about a fifth stage for the experience of a world. It is the experience of a world of being so far unperceived by the everyday consciousness, which starts the process. In the same sense as a psychedelic experience may momentarily make the mind transparent to a non-ego structured realm of consciousness and may lead to a sustained attempt at understanding what has been revealed of a transcendent reality, whether the revolutionary action is violent or peaceful, bitterly resentful or loving, the one desire is to reach beyond established forms. Neptune of 5 Aries, a triangle with wings. Randy, there's your triangle. That's funny. I didn't even notice this. The capacity for self-transcending. This is the symbol of the desire to reach a higher level of existence, of pure aspiration or devotion, of bhakti, which is what Neptune is. It's higher love. And what has emerged in the first phase of the process of differentiation is becoming aware of the possibility of further upreachings. The principle of levitation is seen as one of the two essential factors in evolution. The emergent being glorifies and defies it, but it is still only deifies it, but it is still only an ideal. At this stage, nevertheless, the whole being experiences a childlike longing for its eventual realization. And so then he says, this is a new dimension of being envisioned, mobilizing creative endeavors. So then we have Pluto at 5 Aquarius. A council of ancestors is seen implementing the efforts of a young leader. The root foundation of past performances which power and sustain whatever decision is made in a crisis by an individual. The whole past of mankind stands behind any individual effort, especially in times of critical decisions. The endeavors of the priests who built the California missions had behind it the whole past of Catholic proselytizing, i.e., the attempt to bring the good news to all of the people of the earth. Every individual is far more dependent upon the strength of their ancestors' achievements or oppressed by their failures and lack of vision than they usually believe. This can mean a hidden foundation of individual strength or the inertia of a tradition unable to transcend its limited origins. This symbol suggests that in many situations, reliance upon precedents will enable the aspirant to greatness to tap the power of their deepest roots. And remember, I've been talking throughout our time together about ancestors and really studying your genealogy and getting to know your ancestors, but also, oh, weird. Do you guys see that green light? Hmm, I don't know what it is. Do you guys see? Did that just pop up as I started talking about ancestors? That is the weirdest thing. Did that just pop up? Or has that always been there and I just didn't notice? Still there, just popped up right
It
when I
just
talked.
popped up.
How weird. As I'm talking about ancestors. Oh my God. Sorry. It's just kind of funny. All right. Thank you, ancestors. You're with us. Also, for me, ancestors means star ancestors, the star beings that are our star ancestors from beyond. Maybe that's them popping in and going, don't forget us. Don't just talk about the earthly ancestors. That is the weirdest thing. I don't even know what that came from. All right. Um, moving on. So Uranus sextile Neptune, the first two were last year. So this is just in the slides for you guys. So you have the dates, you have the exact degrees, you can check things. So the first two were in August and November of last year. Take note, especially these two, these have been transiting the Pleiades. The Pleiades run from 29 Taurus to the first degree of Gemini in tropical astrology. This year we have two, July 15th, of course, in that July portal, but then, or sorry, we only have one this year in the July portal, and then we have two more next year in 2027. And notice that the first four, something, either one or two of the planets is retrograde. That's what RX means. So the first one, Neptune was retrograde. The second one, they both were. The third one, Neptune's retrograde. The fourth one, Uranus is. Well, the last one on June 6, 2027 is the only one where they're both direct. That's important because they're both going to be full speed moving forward at the very end of the transit. It's almost like the end of this transit is when we're going to have the full capacity to pick up speed and move forward to both with both of the archetypal energies and the gifts they've brought. This movement is from 2929 Taurus and Pisces, where that November 20th sextile was, all the way to 621 Gemini and Aries, the last one. And again, this is the higher mind and the sign of the lower mind, and the higher heart and the sign of the war god and the will and the drive. But anciently, and we talked about this in the Aries class, Aries anciently was a protector and defender of crops. He kept away pestilence. He even protected the feminine. He actually stood up when his daughter was being raped, accosted, and this was at a time when that was normalized. There is so much rape in Greek and Roman myth, it's disgusting. And he stood up, protected his daughter, and killed the dude. No god other than him ever did that. And so he's a protector, and I think we need to reclaim that original energy of his. It's very important. So Uranus is past, in Gemini, he's past Neptune and Aries. So this is the opening sextile from the Uranus-Neptune conjunction that happened in 1993. And it was from 18 to 20 degrees Capricorn, which is the south node of Pluto, we talked about in the Pluto class. It's also, interestingly, the astrology that's getting hit by all the Sun, Venus, Mars conjunctions this week and the Jupiter oppositions happening today and tomorrow. So it's like, oh, interesting. The next Uranus Pluto conjunction will be in 2165. And as I mentioned before, Uranus has been transiting over the Pleiades, but then once he gets past like 2 degrees, and Gemini keeps going forward. He's moving away from them. Neptune also during this time has transited from the omega point, the last degree of the whole tropical zodiac, 30 Pisces, to the alpha point, 0 Aries. So, for me, this is a transit with the highest potential being spiritual awakening and spiritual opening, taking it to the next level of wherever you're at, right? If you're in this class, you're already awake. You're interested, you're asking questions, you're doing inner work, but for mainstream humanity, this might be their first real awakening. And for those of us that are already awake and have been doing inner work, we can help midwife the awakening process for the rest of the world. That's why you've been working on yourself and going through your underworld journeys and coming back out into the light, because you have been preparing yourself to be a leader in your communities, in your relationships, in small or large ways to help this process that the world is going to go through. Uranus trine Pluto just starts this year. Now, as Randy was saying in his PowerPoint, we've been building to it 2022, 2023, 24, but I'm giving exact dates for when they're exact. So the first one, of course, is this year, 17th to 18th, again, pending Pacific to Eastern time. We'll have another one this year, November 29th, and then two. Oh, actually, no, only one next year, June 15th, and then two more in 2028. And so they move from the first degree, 56 minutes of Gemini Aries, all the way to 849 Gemini Aries. And if you'll notice here, none of these have them both direct. Interestingly, none of them have them both retrograde either. But we don't have that, both direct as we do in the case here. Um, so the higher mind in the sign of the lower mind, linking with the higher will and power in the sign of humanity, but also the sign of the higher mind, because Aquarius is the sign of Uranus. Definitely massive transformation potential around our minds. And our minds are really just this untapped resource, from a humanity perspective. Like in the tarot cards, the swords are air and they represent the mind. And some of the most intense imagery, other than in the major arcana, of course, like the tower, death, the devil, there's some pretty intense major arcana cards, but in terms of just the suits, the swords are overwhelmingly pretty intense, speaking to battles and death. I mean, there's like the 10 of swords. It's like all the swords are in the back of some dead person laying on the floor, or grief or loss. They symbolize some intense things. But the reason for that is because the mind is the hardest thing to master. But when you do, it can cut all the way to ether. And that's what the ace of swords represents, is that piercing through, moving past small mind, lower mind, and getting into spirit. And that's what Uranus can help us do, rise our frequency, open our mind, and find the capacity for realizing more of our fullest potential as humans. So Uranus in Gemini, he's past Pluto. So this is the opening trine from the Uranus-Pluto conjunction from the 60s, from 1965 to 66. That conjunction was 16 to 18 Virgo. There's probably several of you in this class who were born at that Uranus-Pluto conjunction. And so, this is the opening trine. When you follow cycles, especially the slow moving planets, the conjunction starts a new cycle, and then it, depends on, like, the next one's not till 2104, so it's 139 years. And so the opening sextile, is kind of like the new moon, right? When we have a new moon, you don't see the moon because the sun and the moon are conjunct and it's dark. But as we get to the sextile, where the sun and moon are 60 degrees apart, we'll actually see the crescent moon. We'll start seeing what was seeded at the new moon just starting to come into fruition. And then we moved to the square, the opening square. That was when we had the Uranus-Pluto squares of 2012 to 2015. And that's, there's tension, there's conflict. It's like the two principles are battling each other, especially when we're talking about Uranus and Pluto. They both, pack a punch. But now we're in the trine, which is a more harmonious, not just more, it's a harmonious aspect. There's a facilitation. They're both in air signs. They both have a synergy, a harmony, and we can start seeing what was seeded in the 60s really starting to come out and flow in a way that was the whole intention of what was seeded in the 60s. So that's what this is about. Blowing our minds open, be prepared for new information, technology, teachings, humanity awakening. Literally, there are so many positive potentials to this. What was shocking back at the time of the squares and even of the conjunction at the start of the cycle can now be seen as getting integrated and getting, synergized, brought into a form that is working and less like intense. Now, the Neptune Pluto sextile is really interesting. So it goes from 2026 to 2032, okay? And we're going to have, I think there's 13 of them, if I counted right. One, two, three, one, two, three, eight. Yeah, there's 13. So we've got the higher heart, Neptune, in the sign of action, initiation, right? Aries. We have the higher will and power in the sign of humanity. And the last Neptune Pluto conjunction was 1891 to 1892, and it went from 7 degrees to 9 degrees of Gemini, which is where the United States Uranus is. It's where the United States progressed midheaven is. It's where transiting Uranus is going to head as part of this transpersonal grand sextile. As you can see, as we get further, we're actually going to go out to 8, 9, 10 degrees um, of Aquarius, but Uranus is going to get there as well. Here you can see the Uranus-Pluto trine is at 849 Gemini, and the seed of this Neptune-Pluto cycle was 7 to 9 Gemini. So that's really significant. The next Neptune-Pluto conjunction is not until 2385. So it's a 493-year cycle. And I actually spent like an hour studying the cycle this morning, and literally it repeats every 493 years like clockwork. And this is the opening sextile, uh, but we have been in the opening sextile for several stages because these two have funny orbits, and sometimes Pluto actually goes inside the orbit of Neptune, and Neptune's almost moving faster, and they are interesting in that way. So we've actually had sextiles going in and out since the 50s. So we had Neptune and Pluto sextile 1950 to 56, and then again 1976 to 86. And that's why I have a Neptune Pluto sextile on my birth chart because I was born in 78 in the window of the sextile. And now we're getting it again. 2026 to 2032, the opening trine is not going to be till 2087. So they both move really slowly. And I actually checked for the 3,000 years. I did more than that actually, but for these notes, this is fine. So in 3,000 years, they only co-join 6 times. So again, every 493 years. And then I did the math. And it appears the Neptune-Pluto conjunctions move through the entire zodiac in a 46,686 year cycle. So this is not accounting for movement changes over that whole time. Like, for example, I only tracked it moving in like almost 6,000 years. It moved 38 degrees through the zodiac. So my software can't run for 50,000 years. So I don't know if when Neptune and Pluto move through, you know, let's say Sagittarius, opposite the Gemini point I was tracking, if it moves quicker and goes, because a lot of these planets do that. We talked about that with Eris. She moves through Libra in 20 years, and in Aries, she spends 100 years. So I couldn't run 50,000 years of charts. My software has limitations. It only goes up to a certain point and only goes back to a certain point. It's somewhere around 5,000 BC and then up to like 4 or 5,000 AD. But then after that, it doesn't compute things properly. Interestingly, we're in this time of these conjunctions moving through the end of Taurus and into Gemini and essentially crossing the Pleiades, which was fascinating. And I just discovered this today, preparing this PowerPoint. So I have a lot more I want to study on this, but essentially, right now, these conjunctions are ahead of the Pleiades. So the conjunction that happened in 1888, as I said, was at 7 to 9 Gemini. And back then, that wasn't that long ago. It's still like the Pleiades are 29 Taurus to 1 Gemini. It might have been like 28 to 30 Taurus then, actually. But still, the conjunction is ahead of the Pleiades. But then, fascinatingly, in 3,371, the Neptune-Pluto conjunction is precisely conjunct the Pleiades in a 3-day portal. Literally May, I think it was like May 28th, 29th, and 30th in that year of 3,371. The Neptune-Pluto conjunction will be conjunct Pleiades, and then after that, the conjunctions are behind the Pleiades, and the Pleiades move forward. I was like, okay, there's some bigger cycle here that I need to explore. Anyhow, so we get 13 of these sextiles in this third and final sextile portal. And, it's Neptune and Pluto, the two furthest chthonic planets that have to do with what's in the unconscious and have to do with spirituality and transformation. And so this can be about the veil being pulled back and seeing more truth clearly. This can be about humanity opening their heart chakras, which is what is really needed, right? Neptune in Aries, love and action, Pluto in Aquarius, transformation of humanity. That can happen through things that create grief, that crack our hearts open, but it can also be through the choice to love and to expand. And that brings me back to the Lover's card where we need to choose, and we need to choose wisely. As you can see, the first two both are retrograde. Then we have another one that's both a retrograde. We move through all of these that somebody's retrograde at some point until we get to 2030. And then the last five are all direct. And so 2030, 31, 32, the last five precise Neptune Pluto sextiles, both planets will be direct. And the whole entire, period of time, it transits from 316 Aries Aquarius to 1401 Aries Aquarius. So with the end of the line, both of them moving in direct motion for the last five is a big deal. I think we're going to see a lot of movement around what has come forward in this transit in those last years. February 2032, as you can see here, goes out with a bang because we get double Neptune-Pluto sextiles due to Neptune going direct on Christmas Eve at the end of 2031. Pluto goes direct a couple months before in October. And so essentially, um, Pluto is moving quicker than Neptune because Neptune is still picking up speed. So Pluto kind of makes an aspect to Neptune, maybe moves a little past, but then Neptune finally catches up and makes the aspect again. And we get two of them in February. And please note the last one is on Leap Day of 2032. As you can tell, I love these cycles. Like they're really fun. So because the last one is at 1401 Aries Aquarius on Leap Day, I wanted to see the Sabian symbols for rounding up because it is 1401. So we always have to round up to the nearest whole degree. It's going to be 15 Aries, 15 Aquarius. Neptune at 15 Aries. An Indian weaving a ceremonial blanket. projecting into everyday living the realization of wholeness and fulfillment. In Christian traditions, one hears of Jesus' seamless robe. In Asia, one is told of the spiritual vesture of the perfect ones. The man who has attained the spiritual state is figuratively robed in the universe, and more precisely in the Milky Way, the great white robe of interwoven stars. This is the ultimate kind of weaving. There was also Penelope's weaving and unweaving, waiting for the return of her polarizing mate. The mind of the American woman, in which these symbols took concrete form, could think only of Indian weavers. For the white man who's hungering for symbols of a state of living in total harmony with the universe, the traditional Indian can be glamorized as the answer to the inner emptiness of the city dweller, surfeited with artificial values. At any rate, we may thus prefigure a future state of fulfillment in conscious harmony and unpossessive love. If this symbol comes to the consciousness of the inquirer after meaning, deliberately or through an aleatory act of revelation, like the act of throwing sticks to obtain an I Ching symbol or casting the tarot, implied is the profound fact that every individual has as his ultimate conscious task the weaving of his immortal body, his Gnostic robe of glory. It may sound very mystical and far out, but there is a moment in every cycle when, in however small a degree, every individual may be confronted with the potentiality of a fulfilling act of self-realization and may ever so relatively find himself clothed in light for an instant. This is the fifth stage of the sequence. We are told by it that the fulfillment of desire is a possibility at whatever level and in however incomplete a manner it may be experienced. Whew, chills. And then Pluto at 15 Aquarius, two lovebirds singing on a fence, singing happily. The blessing bestowed upon personal achievements by the spiritually fulfilled consciousness of the soul. This symbol can be interpreted at various levels of significance, but it evidently suggests a state of being in which two complementary aspects of spiritual reality, evoking the twins, however we may conceive of them, are united. This union results in happiness or bliss, ananda, as the two birds are sitting on a fence and a fence separates two fields or gardens. The implication is that the separative consciousness of the ego can thus be blessed, perhaps as a spiritual reward for long sustained and well done work. This is the last symbol, which completes whatever. Inner happiness is seen to be the reward for all individuals who have made a valuable contribution to their community or to mankind as a whole. In its highest aspect, this happiness is indeed beatitude. Also chills. So let's all make our valuable contributions to community and mankind as a whole in this period of time because we need it. All hands on deck. So Saturn anchors these planets from 2025 to 2026. Saturn actually began that by sextiling Uranus last year. There were two in April and August. There's only one more this year, January 19th in 10 days. And the first and the third are actually with Saturn in Pisces and Uranus in Taurus. So it's before Uranus moves into Gemini for good and before Saturn moves into Aries for good. The middle one, August 11th last year, was actually Saturn in Aries, Uranus in Gemini. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction only happens once. It's at the alpha degree, 0 degrees, 45 minutes of Aries. It's on February 20th. It's a really, really big deal. And then Saturn will sextile Pluto on March 28th, 2026. So from January to March of this year, Saturn comes into ground, anchor, bring into form the transpersonal grand sextile that is building. And it's important that he anchors the midpoint of the Uranus-Pluto trine. His conjunction to Neptune is pivotal. And remember that degree, the first degree of Aries, is the woman rising out of the sea, Sabian symbol, which I had in the PowerPoint from the Aries class, so I didn't bring it into this one. June 2027 is the Transpersonal Grand Sextile Take Two, because we have another crazy month where they all happen back to back again. So June 6th, Uranus in Gemini, sextile Neptune and Aries, with both of them direct. June 15th, 9 days later, did I do the math right? 9 days later, Uranus trines Pluto. Pluto will be retrograde. And then 13 days later, Neptune sextiles Pluto. So this is a not as tight of a window. The window in July 2026 was like 10 days, and this window is 22, but it's still a big deal. It's still a big deal. And in there we've got the summer solstice or winter in the southern hemisphere. We'll also have Venus trigger all the outers June 13th. Venus will be sextile Neptune conjunct Uranus and trine Pluto. And I actually literally wrote on here, if you want to get married in 2027, June 13th would be a good wedding chart because Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, is linking with all the outer planets. The main thing, though, it's going to raise personal love to higher octaves, essentially, but it just needs to be a relationship that values the non-traditional and the unconventional because Venus is conjunct Uranus, after all. And then June 24th, actually, Saturn will be conjunct Eris, and that's also like powerful. And we talked about Eris in the Eris class, so you can apply those archetypes. So I'm considering this year take one, July, and next year take two. And it's just gonna be crazy in the best way possible, is what I'm calling it. And so I'm calling that time the 777. Because remember, the one this summer is all the fourth degree, which rounds up to 555. Well, this is all the sixth degree, rounding up to seven. And so here are the degrees. Um, and you guys get these slides. So, running from 621 to 652, Aries, Gemini, Aquarius. And then now I want to show you the Sabian symbols for 7 degrees. So Uranus at 7 Gemini, a well bucket and rope under the shade of majestic trees. Man's primordial faith in the hidden sustaining power of life. In contrast with the ambitious drive of modern man for power and wealth, we now have the image of the eternal search for that which is at the root of all living processes, water. This search also demands some effort raising the water-filled bucket, but it is a simple natural effort under the shade of trees which attest to the presence of the life-giving fluid. This presence depends on the cooperation of sky, rain, and earth, the geological formation able to hold the water. And man must develop the intuitive sense which enables him to feel this presence and to make it effectual in his daily life. He must sense the hidden reality which preserves for the use of all living organisms this gift of the sky and bounteous rain. And he talks about how the symbol, the power of the collective and biospiritual energies which sustain all earth-rooted cultures is stressed, in contrast to whatever the technological mind of man can make available to increase his personal comfort and mastery over matter. The symbol implies a fundamental trust in and cooperation with life. Neptune at 7 Aries, a man succeeds in expressing himself simultaneously in two realms. The first realization of the dual nature of man and of the possibilities it implies. Again, evoking those Gemini twins, right? One's mortal, one's immortal. He's expressing himself in two realms. This symbol represents the antithesis of the thesis pictured ill phase 6. I have no idea what that means. Yet in such a fivefold sequence, what we see is contrast rather than opposition. I think there might be a typo there. The primordial one-sidedness of emotional and cultural manifestation actually calls for the compensatory ability to operate at two levels. Thus, the primary dualism of sky and earth, of divine and human, of spirit and matter, The vision and the emotions are focused within sharply defined boundaries. But within these boundaries, they express themselves at two levels. This is the foundation of religion as well as magic. A situation which has become characterized by the symbol can be successfully faced if its spiritual and material implications are understood and actualized. And then he just talks about how in the symbol we see at work man's capacity for living two separate lives and finding fulfillment and happiness in both. On this capacity are founded many of the complexities of human nature. For me, this is all about bridging heaven and earth and bringing the higher self down and fully embodying in the human self. That's what this image evokes. Sorry, I moved. If you saw that jump, it's because I actually moved the PowerPoint because the words at the bottom were hidden by all my icons on my computer. And the last one, Pluto at 7 Aquarius, a child is seen being born out of an egg. The emergence of new mutations according to the great rhythms of the cosmos. The ancient symbolism of the cosmic egg, Hiranyagarbha in Sanskrit, out of which a new universe is born, can be interpreted at several levels. Here we see the appearance of a new type of human being who is not born from ancestors and who therefore is free from the inertia of mankind's past. He is a new product of evolution, he, she, they, a mutant. He constitutes a fresh projection of the creative spirit that emanates from the cosmic or planetary whole, and not from any local cultural or racial tradition, which evokes those white people coming out of the coffins. They weren't white like white people. They were like without color, like completely, not even having any pinkish. And then he talks about the stage it's in. It can be said to announce the emergence of global man for the new age. The power of the whole is focused within him in perfect freedom from ancient standards of value based on local conditions. Wow. So in human design, 2027 is a big deal, and 2026 is preparation for that. So in 2027, we have the mutation degree, we have the Chiron return to the discovery chart, which we talked about in the Chiron class. The mutation, the great mutation is when we shift into gate 55 and we go backwards. It's all about the sun moving through precession. So human design definitely looks at the sun in the degree or the constellation at the time, like looking at a chart. Remember when I told you guys the difference between the ages, when you calculate them based on what constellation is the sign in at the time of the sun rising at the spring equinox, which is what a lot of people think it's supposed to be. You can't see the constellations when the sun is rising at the spring equinox. You can only see them before the sun rises. The ancient way of calculating ages was to see what was rising before the sun. And Aquarius has been rising since at least the 1500s. So we are in the age of Aquarius. Some people think we're not there yet. We're there. But human design looks at when the sun is in certain gates, and it still is just speaking to a shift. Gene key 55 is the only gene key, and gene keys are based on human design. It was an evolution of the human design material by Richard Rudd. Gene key 55 is the only one where the gift and the city are the same thing. It's really striking. They're both freedoms. So he talks about how each gate has a shadow, a gift, and a city. And the shadow is, of course, the shadow. And the gift is when we learn to come into the gift of something and come into balance. But the city is when we've fully awakened it. And that's like, you know, comes with enlightenment. But the gift and the city are the exact same. They're both freedom. And the shadow is victimization. And so gene key 55 runs from tropical 0, 7 minutes of the first degree of Pisces to 5:45 Pisces, 55.6. So there's 6 lines in each gate. And 55.6 is 5:45 Pisces. When the sun goes into 5:45 Pisces at the equinox, um, and moves backwards. And so this is obviously about living sky, but as we've learned, living sky, none of the constellations are evenly divided into 30 degrees for each sign. I teach that in Stargate. Um, Also, we have the Chiron return for the discovery chart of Chiron during the 777 portal because it's in June of 2027. It's just like, wow, you know what? 2027 is going to be on another level. You can read Richard Rudd's text. It's like it's an esoteric text on Gene Key 55. It's on his website. It's free. And you can just Google gene keys, comma 55, comma mutation, and it comes up. Otherwise, it's genekeys.com/articles slash the dash 55 dash 2. Um, so yeah, we're heading into a portal. So I just last thing I want to share, I think we're almost done here, and then we can move to Q&A, is I was, when me and Randy were talking, we were talking about when was the last time, 'cause somebody, one of the astrologers had said, like, the last time we've had Neptune at the midpoint was 500 years ago in the 1500s. But I thought they meant like a harmonious one, and I couldn't find that. And then it ended up being it was like Uranus, I think, and Pluto were square, and Neptune was at the midpoint semi-square, and it was a hard aspect back then. And I was like, well, I want to know when was the last like positive one? And at first I was trying to find the exact same one that's happening now, which Randy showed us that he figured out, doing in the software that there hasn't been one like this. But he also coded for Aries. I would probably also search and see if it just generally, when was the last time Uranus was trine Pluto with Neptune at the midpoint and creating this minor grand sextile or, minor grand trine, major grand sextile, minor grand trine, whatever. But I added in trines because I was like, well, I'm fine if it's just a grand trine of all three. Like, when was the last really tight, harmonious alignment of these three outer planets? And lo and behold, it was in 1771 to 1772. And you can see here, Pluto is at 1750 Capricorn, Neptune's at 1604 Virgo, and Uranus is at 1701 Taurus, and they're all in a grand Earth trine. That was the last time we had a major, tight, harmonious alignment of the three outer planets. And essentially, Uranus trine Neptune back then was exact from 1768 to 1772. Uranus trine Pluto was from 1770 to 1773. And Neptune trine Pluto began in 1776. So it was getting close in 71, 72, 73, but it wasn't exact till 76, and that went until 1786. Well, guess what? That was the portal of the birth of the United States of America. In 1771 and 72, that was a few years before our Constitution and the beginning of the United States, which happened in 1776, which is when the Neptune-Pluto trine began. And that Neptune-Pluto trine is in our chart, the United States of America chart. So, um, grand earth trines can bring vision and ideals and these higher transpersonal energies into manifestation. That's Earth, right? And this wasn't just, well, no, this was Earth. I was going to say these are the end of Earth, but it's not the end of Earth. It was mid-Earth. So here's the United States chart. You can just see, well, actually, sorry. Well, first, this is their solar return. So our solar return. So this year, our solar return happens just before the transpersonal grand sextile portal. Our solar return, the exact return of the sun, is actually July 5th at 3:44 a.m. Philadelphia time. But our birthday is generally celebrated on the 4th. But the exact solar return is the next day, early morning hours. Anyhow, look at that beautiful tight trine between the sun and moon in Pisces. Anyhow, so this is in the lead up. Remember, the 15th to the 25th is the portal for these three planets all aligning, and it's showing up in our solar return chart. But it also, the last time this major harmonious alignment happened with these three planets was right before our nation was born. That is really significant. Like I truly feel a rebirth of the United States, a transformation happening at a profound level. And I think this is going to be a big gateway for us. So you can see here Uranus with Mars and Sedna here in Gemini in the 12th, trine Pluto in the ninth, and then a Neptune at the apex in the 11th. So 12th and ninth are houses that have to do with spirituality and beliefs. And 11th has to do with humanity. And you see these three planets in these really significant houses in our solar return chart. Um, the other thing I wanted to say is this is our natal chart. So now you can see Neptune trine Pluto. Uranus at this point when we were born, our nation was born, sorry, was in Gemini. So it moved out of that Taurus placement where there was a tighter grand trine, but it's you can still see it's just has headed in. And what's important to note, and I talked about this in the Jupiter class, but I just want to touch on it real quick, remind you, especially for the YouTube people. The Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Transpersonal Grand Sextile is going to trigger the United States Uranus and nodes. So we have a very tight alignment of Uranus, who rules the South Node. He's trine the South Node, he's sextile the North Node, and we're just about to have Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto trigger the whole thing. We're going to have Uranus return in 2027. We're going to have Neptune in our fourth house as he finally moves away from the IC. Trine the South Node, sextile, or sorry, trine the North Node, sextile the South Node, and we're going to have Pluto move over our South Node, trine our Uranus, and it's going to form this whole bowl basket. What do they call that? I forget the name of what they call it. Bowl or basket, something like that. Actually, I'm going to call it a grail. So we're going to have Pluto over here, North Node over here, Uranus is going to return, Neptune's over here, trining this, sextiling that, and we're going to have this cup or grail formed in the chart of the United States of America. So, as you can see, we've got, oopsie, what happened? Um, some big things coming. And then Uranus is actually going to cross into our seventh house. And there's a lot more to talk about, but trying not to make this last forever. So suffice it to say, our country is heading into a transpersonal portal similar to the energies our country was born out of. They are returning. We're also having our 250th birthday this year, which I've learned is the quarter millennial birthday, which is 1/4 of 1,000 years, or the semi-quincentennial, because quincentennial means 500 and semi is half of that. And there's a few other words flying around there, but we actually have a big birthday coming up. So, a quote by Mary Carr. Every now and then, we enter the presence of the numinous and deduce for an instant how we're formed, in what detail the force that infuses every petal might specifically run through us, wishing only to lure us into our fullest potential. So we need to call in the highest because any aspect, natally or via transit mundanely, has higher and lower expressions. So, it's up to us to choose lover's card, right? Gemini, Uranus and Gemini. What path will we choose? The one of awakening or the one of staying asleep? The one of embodiment or the one of escapism and going up and out? The one of love or the one of fear? We have to choose wisely. We can activate our full potential personally and collectively if we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, as Jesus said. If we choose love in action, Neptune in Aries. If we choose to come back to beginner's mind, Uranus in Gemini. If we choose to return to our humanity, Pluto in Aquarius, the potential is there. So dream incubation, I'm recommending tonight we bring the transpersonal grand sextile into our dream space. These are pictures of dream temples from ancient Egypt. And actually, they had dream temples in Atlantis and Lemuria. So on the right, we've got patients sleeping in the temple of Asclepius, and on the left, it's the dream of Penelope. It's a scene from the Odyssey. So overnight, as Jupiter in Cancer is going to oppose all those Capricorn planets, and we head to our last opposition to Sirius, let's dream for the collective. So, calling in dreams about this astrology incoming now and into 2032 and even beyond, calling in visions of the highest, but also clear messages about the shadow we must see and work with personally and collectively in order to create conditions for the highest to be received, anchored, and embodied. So we're going to dream incubate for humanity together tonight. And come bring your dreams tomorrow to our final gathering, which is not going to be a teaching class. It's just going to be a gathering for sharing. Um, so, for anybody watching this on YouTube, but also anybody in this class who might be new to me, all of my teachings serve this end of the evolution of consciousness and the awakening of humanity and embodiment and all of it. So, astrology in your shadow helps you use your chart to see and work with the shadow. Embodied astrology helps you work with the celestial energies, bringing them down and in. Stargate Mystery School, I teach you the pre-patriarchal myths that were there before the solar hero ego-based mythos of conquer, win, kill, and tell a different story of the masculine and the feminine. My class, Holy Grail Becoming the Vessel, teaches the Grail mysteries, gives teachings and practices to bridge heaven and earth with your own body and being. Calling in the Light is actually a class that kind of was born out of astrology in your shadow. It's like the other side to the yin and yang, and it's all about calling in the light after the shadow integration. Alchemy of the Asteroid Goddesses is part one in a three-part goddess series. The second part might come towards the end of 2026, but it might be 2027. Part one is about Ceres, Juno, Pallas, Athena, and Vesta, and their pre-patriarchal myths. I also have Foundations of Astrology, intermediate series, teaching you astrology. And then I have a ton of master classes. Eris, the archetype of the 21st century, anchoring the age of Aquarius, Sirius, the spiritual sun of our sun, Regulus moving into Virgo and the shift of leadership, Lionsgate, and why this alignment is something that's happening now, not made up, even though every year, 8/8, there's all these social media things saying it's made up. Anyhow, I talk about it. And then I have a ton of videos on my YouTube channel about the evolution of astrology, why we need new myths to save humanity, Pluto and Aquarius, pre-patriarchal myths of the Pleiades, the 19-year lunar standstill cycle, the descent of the divine feminine, and more. So check it out. My next live course is Tarot as a Tool for Awakening. It'll start mid to late February. I'm going to have the landing page up end of January. I'm going to have either a video with more info or a free webinar. Um, but I'm very excited. It's going to be 10 months of deep dive into tarot. And then also join my Substack. I'm transitioning away from my newsletter on Kajabi. I've had so many issues. Even in this class that we're in right now, we've had like email receiving issues. And I'm just shifting to Substack for my newsletter and for my private content. And I have limited time founder member offers and whatever. Look for all of that, the link below. That is the picture of my Substack. And also coming soon, probably spring equinox-ish. We have to figure it out. But starting a podcast. It's called The Priestess and the Shaman. And it's going to be me and Randy, the Cleveland shaman, the urban shaman. We were going to do this last year. And then life took over, and then I, went into the void and unplugged from everyone and everything. Anyhow, but he and I are actually going to start a podcast together. I'm really excited about it. We just have to figure out our launch date and stay tuned. Um, Here is Randy's website. It's theclevelandshaman.com, and he is brilliant and he has a very unique perspective. And I am very grateful for your participation, Randy, and also just for your friendship, you know. And I look forward to doing more things with Randy in the new year. And This is just a reminder to be the light you wish to see in the world. And my website's divineharmony.com if you don't already know that. The art is by Anael, and I had permission from her to share this. Anael Pavlova. And it's a beautiful, beautiful image of the divine feminine holding the grail in the illuminated higher heart, the white heart, which is, I believe, where we're all heading. Awakening of the heart at the highest of levels. So the end, and this is, of course, image by Nicholas Roerich, Mother of the World. It's one of my favorite paintings. It was a picture at the beginning, and now it's a picture at the end because the mother is the beginning and the end. And now we are going to shift into Q&A. So actually, we did pretty good on time, I think. Because we started about 15 minutes late. So it was 2 hours. I'm happy. I was like, I could be wrong. Okay, so I think I'm gonna stop sharing in case there's questions related to my slides. And let me so you guys are welcome to ask questions of me, Randy, both of us, one of us, whatever. And this, just as a reminder, the Q&A for this class is all about the transpersonal, the collective. So not doing personal questions or chart-related questions. We covered Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in the various classes that we just did in transits and natal charts. I do see, let me see, I think I want to, is everybody seeing me and Randy side by side? Or are you only seeing me? Because I'm not sure. Um, Let me just gallery multi-speaker. Oh, yeah, it's weird. I had you pinned. Did you unpin yourself? Let me see. I want to pin you back. Add pin. Oh, did you unpin yourself? I don't know what happened.
You unpinned me.
I did?
Yeah, when you started your presentation.
Oh, it just automatically happens.
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
it's okay.
So I do have, I think, did somebody private message me with a question because they had to leave early? I guess not, actually. Uh,
There were several that had to
well,
leave
yeah,
early.
there's questions in the regular chat, but somebody had asked before I started recording that they said they might have to leave early and they wanted to make sure to get a question in, and I told them to send it directly to me, but it didn't happen. So anyhow, okay, there's the green light again. Yeah, I know. I cannot figure out for the life of me where that has come from. Is it coming from the plant? No, it's not coming from that's not a real plant. That's a plastic plant, so it's definitely not. Yeah, but there's nothing on my screen. I, I think it's the ancestors. Anyhow, all right. So let me just scroll up and see if you guys have questions, pop it down there. I mean, the hard part, it would be ideal. Turns my teeth green. It would be ideal if you did post a question earlier, just copy and repost it because the problem is when I scroll up to try and read things, the moment somebody posts another message, it pops me back down to the bottom and it's very discombobulating. So anyhow, are there any questions? I hope, I'll just say as I'm waiting, I hope that from this presentation, you've felt inspired about the highest potential of what's coming in. I mean, one thing I know I've said this, I don't think I've said it in this series, but I've said it in some of my classes, but like, you know, harmonious aspects don't just mean, oh, it's always positive, just like hard aspects don't always mean, oh, it's negative. Actually, some of the world's spiritual teachers that have so much compassion and wisdom to share, their natal charts are full of intense aspects. And it was because of the intensity in the natal signature that it helped them awaken. So sometimes intense things serve awakening. And then there also have been a bunch of studies on sociopaths and murderers. And there was like, I remember this one study I read where there was a more common pattern of a lot of harmonious aspects and not enough tension aspects in the charts of these people who were sociopaths and, did horrible things. So, like, there's an example of harmonious aspects not always being positive. Like, sometimes when things are too easy or there's not enough edginess, like you could just rest on your laurels and do nothing, or you could, I mean, whatever. Obviously most people don't end up going down the sociopath path, but or the mass murderer. Um so, we really have choice in the matter, which brings me back to Uranus and Gemini and the Gemini twins and that lover's card. And we need to choose, and we need to choose with consciousness and awareness. And anything you do that helps cultivate, your intuition, your embodiment, your healing, um, the study of mystical things, whether it's astrology or tarot or shamanism or whatever, it's just like, it's just simply going to serve you. And yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting, at least essentially this, is about this year, but there was some insight into next year and then seeing how long these cycles last. It's um we're heading into a portal. I sent a private message. Oh, oh, I saw that you said a typo, but I didn't think it was a question. I don't know because I don't have my slide up. But here, hold on. Let me just check it. You said that the Uranus, Pluto, oopsie, I'm just checking. You guys can't see it, but I'm gonna just go see real quick. There might have been a typo on a slide on Uranus, Trine, Pluto. Um, no, Uranus, Trine. Oh yeah, it says Aries. That's supposed to say Aquarius. Oh my goodness. Thank you. So, you know what? Let me just show this one real quick. La, la, la. So this, I think I had Neptune on the brain or something. This should say Gemini to Aquarius. Gemini to Aquarius. It shouldn't say Aries. Sorry about that. Um, all right. Stop share. Thank you, Tara. Uh, that was helpful so I can correct myself while everybody's here. Um, so no other questions? If there are, now's the time. Otherwise, we can close. And then again, bring this transpersonal energy with you into your dream space tonight. And yeah, we'll dream incubate for humanity tonight, and then we'll gather together tomorrow and share if you want to share. It's, optional. One thing I want to say, I've said it a couple times, but in case you haven't seen the email, tomorrow's class, there's no teaching. It's just a gathering. And it's not going to be recorded because it is a space where people are going to be sharing their personal stuff. And, if you're there, great, you get to hear it. But like, it's not like I'm teaching something and you're going to miss the teaching. So I'm not going to record that and send it out. And, maybe that'll free people up to want to share more because they know it's not being recorded and whatever. I don't know. Maybe not. But that's what's going to happen tomorrow. So no teachings, just a gathering and sharing from the heart if you want to be heard or witnessed or seen, or for also us to hear and witness and see each other. And I hope you'll come. It is on Saturday, so maybe it'll be easier for some people. Same time, same place. And there are a few things coming in the chat. Hold on, let me see. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful and insightful. I have to miss tomorrow because of clients. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. This has been great. Look forward to the podcast. As a practical point, Kristen, as a practical point, it's easy to think of it all working out beautifully as we make the highest choices, but the truth is we'll be in the midst of people continue to make the lowest choices. So blessings to all. Well, I mean, that's possible, but there's also this kind of astrology has the capacity to raise consciousness. And remember, there's a teaching about the tipping point. So it doesn't take a large amount until we reach the tipping point. So it's about us and those of us who have the awareness and have the consciousness really choosing in every moment to anchor that vibration, to come back to it, because that's actually part of the practice. It's not about perfection. Everybody falls out of it. Even a fully enlightened being is going to have moments where that ego pops in, but then they're going to have like the ability to go, oh, yeah, and it's not going to trigger their ego because they attained enlightenment. But like they say, it's not that all of a sudden magically poof, life is now perfect. It's just that you're stepping outside of this small perspective of duality and you're seeing the greater picture and then you're bringing that forward in how you show up in the world, how you interact with others. So that ability to come back to center when we fall out of it is just a very important work to cultivate. Um, so this was amazing. Thank you. Thank you. My mind is blown with both your knowledge. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Randy. I'm so glad you were able
Thank
to
you, everyone.
come and be here with us and sending us all love as we move into the dream space tonight. We're going to go out into the snow. So I'll see you tomorrow, 2 p.m. for our final gathering. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.